Today, we're going to learn how to make cyanide in our kitchen.
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
Alright, so today we're going to make traditional cherry brandy, or as it's called in Germany, Kirschwasser. Kirschwasser just means cherry water. Now if you go to the liquor store, chances are this is going to be the only kind of Kirschwasser you find, and it is terrible. It says on the bottle, flavored brandy. Anytime you see something that says naturally flavored, that means they put extract in it. They take cherry extract and they add it to it. It has a little bit of a cough syrupy kind of vibe to it, and it's not good. So this is bottom shelf stuff that you would see in a bar for cocktails. You really wouldn't ever want to drink this straight, I don't think. But traditionally, Kirschwasser is something that you have after dinner in a little shot glass and you drink it straight. Not this stuff. I got that stuff as a flavor comparison so that I could try to hypothetically make my own, see how that tasted in comparison to this. But honestly, if it tastes like this, I didn't do it right. And so we're going to make a delicious fruit brandy using nothing but fruit. We're not going to add sugar, because if you add sugar, it makes it kind of hot tasting. I'm really going to try to not add anything to this other than cherries and cherry juice. Cherries have a stone in them, and the stone or pit or seed has a little kernel in it, and the kernel has a small quantity of a compound called amygdalin. When amygdalin is digested, it can turn into cyanide. That is deadly. You don't want cyanide in anything. But people have been making Kirschwasser and apricot brandy and plum brandy, pretty much any sort of stone fruit brandy with the stones in the fermentation for centuries, and nobody dies from it because the amount of potential amygdalin or cyanide that gets into your final product is much lower than the threshold for what you can process in a day. And if you watch my amaretto video, I actually used cherry stones and apricot pits to make the amaretto. I talk about the cyanide thing at length. If you'd like a little bit more information on it, go ahead and check out this video right up here, just so you feel safe. So the reason why I mention all that is because we're not going to take the stones out of the fruit, and I'm not even going to worry about the stems. It's going to get all mashed together and fermented all at the same time, because pretty much everything about this is flavor. So I'm going to put the recipe for this down in the video description. I have about 20 pounds of cherries and about a gallon of cherry juice. So first things first, we're going to mash the shit out of some cherries. And there's really no better way to do it. The reason why you want to do this by hand and not by a mechanical method is to prevent those stones from getting cracked. If you crack the stones, you're going to have a much higher potential for leaching out undesirable compounds, and mainly it'll just make it really bitter. But if you are dead set against that and you don't want to risk it, just take the stones out. Just take the pits out of the cherries and, toss them in the garbage. It's no big deal. In my opinion, you're going to have a reduction in flavor, but you'll have peace of mind. We're only going to leave the stones in for the fermentation process, and then we're going to strain everything out. If you want to make your life a little bit easier, freeze all of your fruit. If you freeze it, it's going to bust all the cell walls in the fruit and make it easier for the juice to come out and get released into your fermentation. Since I never do anything with any sort of time to spare, I didn't have time to do that and then thaw them out. So fresh cherries it is, but hell, that's what pectic enzyme is for. Alright, so now I've got all the cherries in here. I ended up getting 6 more pounds of cherries from the grocery store. I literally bought them out. So we've got a total of about 26 pounds of cherries. That is not enough. If you want to make a full bucket, I recommend you get closer to 30, maybe 40. I also only had 1 1/4 gallons of cherry juice bought them out on that too, because I've only got about 4.5 gallons of material here. Since I'm not adding any sugar, 4.5 gallons is not gonna have a very high yield. It looks like it's about 1.072. All right, so if it ferments out to dryness, we'll get 9.18 or 9.2% alcohol, which is not bad. For now, it's time to add the yeast. We're gonna go with 71B. I really like it because it ferments very well, but also it's a wine yeast, so it tends to leave more wine esters and set things up for a good fermentation for the wine, as far as not going too fast. Like if I were to use distiller's yeast, the problem with that is it burns so fast and so hot that you're going to lose some aromatics in there. Same thing with EC1118, the champagne yeast. That one will really kind of cook through a lot of the aromatics and they end up coming out of your airlock. You don't want that. So you want something that's going to go a little bit slower, that's more designed for a flavorful wine. 71B is a good one. Another one is K1V116. I'll put links to those down in the video description with the recipe. So keep in mind, since this has solids in the mix, you want to come in at least once a day, preferably twice a day. Take a big sanitized spoon and push that bag down to keep the top of that fruit nice and moist. Keep it all stirred in, because if you don't, it's going to end up sitting on top, getting dry and growing mold, and you don't want mold in there. A little bit of bacterial infection is fine for a distillation fermentation, not if you're going for a wine. So you want to be really careful about that if you're going to just turn this into a wine. Keep your sanitation level nice and high. Other than that, we're just going to let it rock and roll. Found something this shit is good for. Alright, so in between when I got the fermentation ready to go and when it finished, I actually tested out one of these Inkbird temperature controllers and I filmed an entire review. And I went ahead and I cut that into a separate video so I didn't make this one too long. But if you want to check that out and see how they work and see how I used it for fermentation, especially fermentation intended for distillation, check out the video up in the link up here. I'll also put a link for it down in the video description. Alright, so the cherry wash is done fermenting. Alright, so now all I got to do is drain the cherry wash, and if you have a fruit press, you can go ahead and squeeze the bag and get all your juice out of there, or you can just use your hands to do it. But if you do that, my recommendation is to let that wash settle for one more day, and then you can siphon it into your still, because you're going to get a lot of particulate and sediment kind of disturbed in that mix. So it's better if you let it settle one more time before you put it into your still, unless you have a jacketed boiler. Once I get this all strained out, the liquor fairy is going to come home from vacation and get this started. And I'm going to disappear because, hypothetically. Alrighty, so now we've got a big ass jar of Kirschwasser. This has been proofed down to about 45% and smells pretty good in the jar. I think we need to have a little taste. But before we taste this, I just want to say a huge shout out, thank you to all of my Patreons and all these folks down here. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support me and to give me a ton of good ideas, and for voting on the poll about whether or not I was going to leave the pits in or leave them out, and pits in won. So thank you guys so much, and as always, you're definitely keeping my lights on. Thank you. Alright, so now let's give this a taste. It's definitely not as strong in the cherry aroma as the crappy stuff I bought from the liquor store, but that's kind of expected because I think that one uses cherry essence as an after flavoring. But you can definitely pick up the cherry in there. And there's a nice little licorice note. And I noticed that licorice note when I did the plum rakia in a previous video, and I'm going to post that right up here if you're interested. That is good. You can pick up some of that cherry I'm picking up a little bit of an earthiness from the pits, but it's not unpleasant, it's not astringent. The retro nasal, you're getting a nice little cherry boost through there too. I think this will be really good once we age it. I know traditionally Kirschwasser is not aged on wood, but I have a feeling this might end up pretty tasty on some wood. I just haven't decided what I want to do with it. So if you have any suggestions on what to age this on, post them down in the comments. Yeah, it's really nice. There's some implied sweetness in there too. I really like this. It's pretty damn tasty. But I can see why people distill this stuff twice to kind of clarify the flavors. One of the things that the Liquor Fairy told me about was that the transitions, especially because this was a smaller volume, the transitions were very muddy and very close together. So it was difficult to find the heads hearts transition and the hearts tails transition. That's something you run into when you have smaller volumes to deal with. When you go to blend these things, you need to take some of the heads and put that into your hearts just so that you can carry that flavor over. Not a whole lot. I mean, you don't want to make it a headache in a jar, but you definitely want to add some in there so that you can keep that fruit flavor. That is delicious. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and hit the like button because it really helps out the channel, helps boost me up in the rankings so that my videos end up getting shared with people who may have never seen me but might enjoy the content. If you want to see what I'm going to do next time, do yourself a favor, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button down below and make sure you hit the little bell icon right next to it so that you can get notified when I post new content. If you have any questions, comments about this, suggestions, tweaks on my recipe, go ahead and post those down in the comment section down below. And don't forget to check out my review video for the Inkbird temp controller. Link's going to be right up here for you. All right, I'm going to finish this off and go edit the video. Thanks for watching. Talk at you later.